Welcome back to Beyond the Tube. Thanks so much for being here. Today, we are very lucky to have the wonderful Bree, speech therapist, managing director, and speechy coach, who will talk to us about all things speech therapy related and hopefully help you gain an insight into what it's like to be a speech therapist whilst also coaching other speech therapists on how to do their job. Thanks for joining us today, Bree. Appreciate that.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you again. I'm a little bit excited and nervous. This is my first proper podcast.
Really?
Yeah.
Welcome. I hope
you.
I can make it nice and chilled and relaxed. We just want it to be all about conversation and hopefully not too structured.
Yeah.
Just talk about real life. Real life, what it's really like.
Yeah, I think that's really nice. Like we were talking about earlier, you and I already have that rapport through our existing relationship. So it's then nice to be helping other parents with that too.
Definitely.
But it's nice for me as well because we already know each other.
It does help.
Yeah.
It does help. I agree.
Yeah.
And it hopefully makes things more relatable for people who are listening or potentially watching now that we are a video podcast.
Yeah.
So hopefully people who are watching as well can see that, you know, we know each other.
Yeah, but it's such a wonderful thing that you're doing, helping parents and sharing your experience. So it's so lovely. I'm happy to be part of it. Thank you.
I'm really glad that you're here because I know how much knowledge you've got and obviously how your repertoire has expanded recently and how that can definitely translate to helping other parents and other kids primarily.
Yeah.
So I would love it if you could start by just unpacking, what does your day look like?
Yeah.
What's the life in Bree like?
Yeah. So it has changed this year. So I have been working as a speech pathologist for a decade now. But my primary role at the moment is managing director of a private practice. But I spend most of my time empowering and helping other speech pathologists as well too. So whether that's mentoring or coaching or helping them grow and be confident.
It's amazing.
We need more speech pathologists and we need more confident speech pathologists. So I feel really passionate about helping the next generation of speech therapists so that they can help more kids and we can have more impact as well. And sharing my knowledge as well and having that abundance mentality, right?
Yes.
I have since decreased my own caseload of clients.
Yes.
As you know, I still see a handful of clients and keep my toe in there as well too. But it does pull me in a lot of different directions. So I have been a lot more flexible with my time lately. Yeah. I do move around a little bit more, which is different for me. So I get to go to a few of our other clinics and move around, and it's nice because, you know, you're always wanting to keep learning and expanding with your own skills. So it has challenged me in new ways, which has been good after 10 years. So it's really nice to be, you know, constantly growing and expanding that way too. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And obviously with the abundance of knowledge that you've had over the last decade and taking on 2 new roles effectively, why do you wake up every morning and go, I love my job and I love being a speech therapist? And what is it?
I always use this example, and I feel like this was a really big aha moment for me. I walked into a cafe. So often the clients, they see us for a long term. We have the capacity to do that in the clinic that we are. So if they need, you know, more longer term continual therapy, we can offer that.
Yes.
So often when children come in, parents can feel lost. Often we're the first point of call as speech pathologists too, because talking is you know, noticeable or easier to noticeable than perhaps something sensory or something else. So often we can be the first point of call and parents come to us, you know, defeated, feeling guilty, feeling really, you know, battled.
And lost, I imagine.
Yeah. And they don't know what to do. Maybe their child isn't talking or communicating. And then they feel like their child is having that sense of disconnect. And, you know, they're really wanting to help their kids, but they don't know how.
Yes.
And you see that family come in first and foremost and they're feeling lost and you feel all those emotions with them. And you go on a journey with them. But what is the most rewarding and what just brings a tear to my eye still when I think about it is then the impact that you're having on that family become part of their life. Their eyes light up when they come and see you. but I was actually, the example I was going to give is I was at a cafe just in our local area.
Yes.
And I like to say, in mufti. So I didn't look like I do now, which is challenging for some kids because you look,
they know you're in one way and they see you in something else.
Yeah.
Is that the same person?
Yeah. Didn't have my glasses on, didn't have my uniform on. And this child yelled out my name across the room and came running over to me to tell him about how excited he was to see me and about his day and what he had done.
Yeah.
And his mum just burst into tears. And she was just like, I never thought this would be possible. He's never felt confident enough to talk, let alone come and approach you in an unfamiliar, environment and talk in front of people. And I was also with my husband, and he started chatting to my husband, and she was just lost it. And she was just
beautiful.
Yeah, she was just like, thank you so much. You have made such a difference in our lives. And just that in a nutshell is, why we do what we do, right?
It's incredible.
You're making change in someone's life for the better.
Yes.
And
definitely.
Yeah, you become a big part of their family as well too, which is lovely. I've seen siblings being born, and sometimes I've seen the siblings as well too. And
whole family.
You're like part of
whole family experience.
You're like part of the furniture in their family, which is
lovely. I think that's so wonderful. And I mean, I can attest to that myself.
Yeah.
And the experience that we've obviously had with Ezra, and the same thing, it's life-changing. It really is life-changing. And you can say that as a parent. From my perspective, it's been life-changing for our family and for us. But imagine what it's like for Ezra.
Yes, exactly.
And what that's opened up for him. Not dissimilar to this child that you were just referring to. Like it's so similar because it changes their world in how they can communicate and how they can feel understood. And there was a long time where Ezra had such frustration, as you're well aware, that he couldn't articulate. He knew what he wanted to say, but he couldn't say, he didn't know how to do it. And the steps and the leaps and the bounds that he has taken have been huge. So from the opposite perspective, I can see that.
That's nice.
From the outside looking in, I see that, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, and that's not uncommon as well for children to come in feeling really frustrated or mistaken to be naughty kids or behavioural kids as well too. But often that's how they're dealing with, not being able to get across what they need or they want. So, them being able to do that is, you see the change in them drastically.
Yes. Yeah. And I can attest to that. Definitely attest to that. Tell me what it is that a speech therapist actually does.
Yes. So a speech therapist's role is really broad. So obviously we can work in an adult population or a pediatric or child population. And then within the child or the pediatric population is then such a wide scope as well too. So you can have speech therapists that are quite specialized. So they might only work with one area of speech pathology. So that could be just speech sounds.
Okay.
They could have a clinic that is just specializing in complex speech sounds. Others could specialize in complex diagnoses. So we do have some feeding specialists, speeches that just do that. Or there can be more generalist speech pathologists who work with a variety of different populations and a variety of different diagnoses as well.
Okay.
So typically, depending on the workplace will dictate the type of caseload that you see.
Right.
So again, there are certain workplaces where you only work with a certain diagnosis, and that would be all that you see. So it might be only children with autism.
Right. Okay.
That you see. Or it might be that you work in a cleft palate clinic and you only work in cleft palate.
Yes.
Maybe you work in a feeding clinic, so you're always only seeing, babies or, younger children with feeding tubes and things, but you're working in a hospital. So that's all that comes through.
So it changes what you're actually seeing.
Yes.
That makes sense.
So in a private practice clinic or in a community health setting, you have a little bit more flexibility because you are open to referrals from a wide range of different people, and often doctors, they come to the doctor potentially or just themselves will come in and say, I have concerns about speech or language, or my child isn't talking.
Yes.
And that's what we do, or that's what I do. Come in, and then we first assess the child and determine what are the breakdowns, what are the strengths, what do we need to do, and then we develop a therapy plan from there moving forward. And that could be speech, language, literacy, fluency, it could be voice, or it could be all of those things. And then we need to go, right, okay, what are we going to do and how are we going to do this?
Yes.
And a big part of what we do as speech therapists is often then link children up with a team that they need and other services. So you would know a lot about this. So some parents come already linked up with some, other professionals, which is great. Other parents need guidance on where to start.
Yes.
So, for example, we might be going, okay, I think you should see a pediatrician.
Yeah.
I think that would help you. Maybe we need to get funding and help you through that process.
Yep.
We're looking like there might be some sensory involvement. Maybe an OT would be, or an occupational therapist would be really good to go and get assessment from.
Okay.
Or a psychologist.
Yeah.
So we build a team around the child typically as well.
Yes.
Depending on what the child needs. Every child's different.
Yes.
And school and preschool is probably a big one as well too.
Yeah.
If the child is very, at school or they're going to preschool often, it's important that everyone's on the same page and talking and working towards a common goal, but all having different roles and bringing different things to the table.
Definitely. I would imagine the collaboration between all the different therapists and doctors, as it may be, would be key in ensuring their success.
Absolutely. I think if a child is working only on one thing, but it's impacted by a multitude of other things, there's only so much progress you will make.
Yes, I agree.
And there's only so much we can do as a speech therapist. For example, we might be able to implement some behavioural strategies and regulation strategies, but often that's not our specialty.
Yes.
So we do need someone who actually specialises in that to help work with us.
Exactly.
And do that.
Yeah.
And it's like anything. It's like anything you do in life, whether you're, an athlete or a sport, you need a team of people to help you. So it's so important, and important that all those people are talking.
Yes.
As well too, and communicating or being updated as well.
Yes. I can attest to that being a key to success.
Yeah.
Because in Ezra's case, that's definitely been important to have that communication between all the moving parts.
Yes.
Because we were previously, I think, very siloed in each person had their role, but there wasn't a lot of coming together and discussing, are we all working together to get Ezra to the place that we need him to be?
Yes.
And obviously your focus is speech, and the occupational therapist, her goals are different, and physio's different, and everybody has different goals.
Yeah.
But ultimately he's one child with a collective goal.
Yes.
And everybody needs to remember that there's all these moving parts that contribute to it. So for us, it's taken a long time to get the right team involved. And obviously you've played a big part in helping us find the right people and driving a lot of what's been happening. And I think that's really, really key.
Yeah.
On that, I would love to understand clinically, if you've got a child, or if anyone who's listening has got a child who has a tube feed, and maybe specifically an NG tube or has had an NG tube, how does your approach change when you're dealing with kids who do have feeding challenges, but particularly a tube that is physically obstructing their airway and their vocal cords? What does that change for you?
Yeah. First and foremost, the important thing to consider is not every tube-fed child is the same.
Absolutely.
So they all need, depending on, again, their age or their type of tube or their type of difficulty, that does change. But I think when that child walks in the door, the first thing that you need to do as a speech therapist is get as much information as you can.
Yes.
And they may still have speech and language and communication difficulties or co-occurring things.
Oh, yes.
Along with their feeding or tube difficulties, which we still need to investigate.
Yes.
But we first need to find out and do that in-depth case history. What's been going on?
Yes.
What's their diagnosis, if anything? What help are you already receiving? What types of feeding are we doing at the moment? Or what's been implemented and why? What medical team? What's going on? So I like to get an inventory of, all of that information. I then like to figure out, okay, what are we doing and what can't we do? And I think the biggest thing is then finding out, you and I have had lots of conversations about what do we want to achieve.
Yes.
So do we want that child to be eating orally and eating typically and enjoying meal times differently?
Yes.
Like, what is the goal here? Is it that he can communicate what he wants to eat more
Yeah.
so at the moment?
Yeah.
Is he already seeing a specialist for his feeding, and that our role here is more about the communication around food, or maybe around the social skills around food?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think it's then tailoring it to the child and not kind of making it a cookie cutter. Oh, that child's got a tube, so I'll follow this exact protocol and that will be relevant for every child.
Definitely.
So I think that's the first thing that I do, is just gather as much information I can, and then make decisions from there around what is the best way to go down. But that has to be a joint decision. Like, the family has to be on the same page with that. And then often speaking to, whether it's getting that information through the parent or speaking to the doctor or the team directly about, okay, what's the surgical plan, or what's the plan, or is this long-term feeding? What are we doing with that? And then we can make a plan around that.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really good point about not having a cookie cutter approach. Because I know other tube families who have got children who, at this stage, and it may change in the future depending on what happens further, with further investigation into their diagnoses, but they cannot orally eat. So it's not a case of we're trying to get them to, achieve that goal. That goal for them is very different. Obviously, in our case with Ezra, that is our goal, is to increase his ability to be able to intake food orally. And he is as safe as they can possibly make him to be able to do that. But for other families and other kids, that absolutely is not end game for them. This is permanent. It is something, but there may be a segue between different types of tubes. So they may start with an NG whilst they're investigating and then move to a gastrostomy of some description. So obviously that changes, which I think is really important to note, because it's very easy, I think, particularly when you're not in this community, to look at a child who has a tube of any description and think one size fits all. And there's one reason why that kid has a tube, and it's quite obvious that that's not the case. And everyone's end goal around feeding is very different, which I think is
exactly so important.
So that's really interesting to hear that approach does change from child to child and family to family, because obviously everybody's goals are different. Obviously, for people who are thinking about speech therapy, and myself included, you generally think speech therapists. They help with talking or stuttering or some sort of really obvious speech delay. My kid's 5 and doesn't talk, probably going to need a speech therapist. Those are obviously quite obvious reasons, and I think society dictates that that's what a speech therapist does. You've obviously unpacked a lot around what a speech therapist does, and that it goes far beyond that. I would love to know what you would say to parents of children, of particularly young children, maybe under 5. Other than those really obvious things, what are other things parents should be looking out for that they may need to watch and act, i.e. go and find a speech therapist for the not so common things?
That's a really good question, and I think that's what a lot of parents would love information on, which is really good. I think it's important to consider, especially with that around that 5 years of age, you're looking at, that's early intervention. Around that 5 year, those early years are really, really pivotal. And I would say that early intervention is key. So getting on top of these things and thinking about these additional things really early is so important. And if your child is struggling with talking or speech sounds, there can be a link sometimes to potentially having literacy difficulties or things in the future or down the track as they go to school. So a goal a lot of the time for parents is that we don't start off school behind.
That's true.
And we want to make sure that we're giving the child the best chance to start well and not start on the back foot. So a lot of the times we also look at literacy skills or pre-literacy skills to make sure that we're not seeing a correlation between their speech and language delay and those literacy skills. There's the obvious connections, as if they're saying some sounds wrong, they're going to be writing them wrong or sounding out the words wrong. So we like to work on those pretty early. So that to mitigate, the need for long-term therapy down the track, we get on top of things early. Surrounding those ones as well is social skills.
Okay.
So I think potentially a lot of people don't think about social skills surrounding, children can just struggle with it in general.
Yeah.
And that can be a wide range of different things. There's a big movement at the moment with neurodiverse affirming approaches. So finding how your child likes to communicate and empowering them in a way that suits them, that they feel comfortable with, is really important as well too. So if your child's having trouble making friends or, holding conversations or being around their peers or whatever that is, a speech therapist can often help a lot with those types of things too. So,
like it's like that light bulb moment of, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yes. And then we obviously, like you said, the more obvious things would be speech sounds, language, and fluency or stuttering that we do work with. There are some more uncommon things that we do. So we obviously have voice. So some children, particularly that have tubes, can have some voice disorders or difficulties. We do see children with those difficulties. It's not something that we see super commonly because just in terms of the demographic of the area sometimes that you're in, you don't necessarily get a lot of them walking through the door. And there are some voice specialists out there where they just purely focus on working on children's, vocal folds and voice in general. But that is something that a speech therapist would work with as well. And then you've got very more specialized medical conditions that, a speech therapist would deal with to do with swallowing potentially. So, some children might require a tracheostomy and there's a speech therapist that would work with a child particularly on those things, typically in a hospital setting a lot of the time. Or if a child's being rehabbed for, a particular condition or an accident, there's a lot of things to do with swallowing there and communication. And there are some children who are non-speaking for whatever reason, or might have some complex things going on. Maybe they're autistic. So we would help with some alternative forms of communication for those children as well.
How do you find with those children, when you're talking about different forms of communication, if we're talking about early intervention, so typically moving from preschool to school, how do you find the acceptance of school in this? Because, I personally have got two older children, one 16, one 13 and a half, and we have done a mix of, Christian schools, private school, and public school with very different experiences at all. So I feel that I'm in a good position to be able to ask this question because I have experienced lots of different types of schooling. And straight away I'm thinking of myself with Ezra, and he's only got 18 months now before he starts school, which is not long in the scheme of things.
It goes fast.
Goes very fast. And I'm wondering, obviously his features has improved significantly, but has it improved enough for teachers to be able to understand him or peers to be able to understand him? And what if he becomes more recluse and doesn't want to interact with other children? And how do we look at alternative forms of communication where he has done some sign language before and does know some signs and still continues to use those to this day? How do you find, in your professional opinion, that acceptance at school?
Yes, that's a great question too. Very mixed. So depending on the school or depending on the teacher, it can be very different. And I guess that comes down to a few things. One, education. So education of how maybe comfortable the teacher or the school is or how familiar the school is with those things. Sometimes if a school has had a few children that have gone through similar things already, they feel a lot more comfortable with it and they feel educated on it. Sometimes there's preschools and schools that aren't at all, but they're very open and they welcome you in, and you can do education, you can do training with the teachers or the educators, and they're really open to it, which is great. It also comes down to funding sometimes too. So depending on the school and the level of funding they can have access to, or also just how the school has set up their ability to welcome, visitors in. it can be tricky to navigate just with logistics sometimes of whether they're able to have you there for funding purposes or not.
Yes.
And teachers do a great job in terms of like they're managing so many children at once.
Yes.
It can be so tricky for them time-wise to make that work. And that's totally understandable.
Yes.
So it really depends on, you know, how they've set systems up for other professionals to come into the school based on the funding they have available and how familiar they are with it too.
Yes.
Typically, when we come in, we might do an observation in the school and just see what's happening.
Yes.
And we can make suggestions about how that could be easily, you know, transformed in a positive light.
Yes.
And put things in place that are really easy to implement and make it really achievable.
Absolutely.
And then that often we can develop a good working relationship with the teachers moving forward with that.
Yeah.
Some speech pathologists will even work at the schools and they'll see children at the schools.
Quite commonly. Yeah.
And sometimes that can work really well because they're physically there and there's not, you know, there's all these logistics that aren't needing to be organized.
Yes.
But it is very varied depending on the school and, if I'm being completely honest, depending on the school and or the teacher and their funding and availability.
Yeah. What would your tips be for any parents who maybe have children who have started school this year or are starting school next year or even in the coming years and maybe facing these challenges, whether that's with a tube, it could be autism, it could be some other diagnosis where their child is delayed in their speech or maybe nonverbal, and looking at other ways of communication for their children? What would your tips be in communicating that with the school, but also keeping their speech therapist highly involved in that situation?
Yes. I think what you just said is hitting the nail on the head, is having that open line of communication and developing that relationship very early on with the teacher.
Yes.
I think honesty is the best policy, is just being honest on where you're at and what your expectation is.
Yes.
And whether that can be met or not. You know, this is what you're expecting as a parent. This is what you're needing. Are you able to work with me? And just developing that understanding really early on in the term or the year or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I always say to my parents is that I really love talking to the teachers when possible.
Yes.
So I would encourage your speech therapist and teacher to be talking.
Yes.
I think that's really helpful because it doesn't necessarily mean the teacher or the speech therapist needs to take hours of time to do it. It can just be quick, simple phone calls. It could be simple emails, keeping everyone up to date. It doesn't have to be, let's arrange hours and hours to go out to the school and have a meeting or whatever, which is beneficial sometimes.
Yes, of course.
I've had many a meeting where we've brought everyone into the school to discuss, you know, everything and all get on the same page.
Yes.
But it can just be little achievable things, particularly at your start.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be super tricky.
No. And would you say that as part of that early process of looking for schools, and often people are, you know, maybe on borderlines of, you know, two schools, or they may be toying with, do I send my child to a Catholic or a Christian school or a private school, or do I send them to a state school? What are my choices and what do I do? Do you think it's beneficial to have those conversations pre-enrollment
Yeah.
to see what the school has available, what they're open to, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think if you can, definitely having those conversations as early as you can, it'd be great. So you're on the same page, but you also know what you're walking into.
Yeah.
It does have to be a balancing act though as well. I think your school also needs to align with your values.
Yes.
And you need to make sure that it's aligning with you and your child and what you want, you know, for your child.
Yes.
In terms of that. I know some parents, you know, might feel like they're making huge sacrifices by not sending them to a school that they want to for the needs of their child, and vice versa.
True.
So it is a balancing act of, okay, is this school aligning with me and my values?
Yeah.
As well as, do they have the capacity to help my child being more medically complex or with a few things going on?
Yes.
Do they have the capacity? And some schools might not, and it's okay if they don't.
Yeah.
Particularly if your child is medically complex, they might be honest and say, listen, we don't have the resources to be able to do that or the funding.
Yes.
And then at least you know from the get-go what they're able to do and what they're not able to do.
Yeah. I think that's really great advice. And I think that is real advice
Yes.
that will help people take on board and go, oh, this is something I can actually do.
Yeah.
Because at some point, unless your choice is to homeschool your children, which is absolutely another option, but at some point, most people are going to be faced with this conundrum and have to make a decision on how do I best manage this?
Yes.
How do I get my school involved? And it could be even your preschool. I mean, I personally went on a huge journey trying to find Ezra a preschool, and it took me 2 years.
Yes.
Because of, unfortunately, in our area, there's an abundance of children needing childcare services.
Yes.
And right, wrong, or otherwise, they cherry pick who they want.
Yes.
We're very fortunate to find where we found for Ezra, and they've been incredible at making sure that, lines of communication are open. They want knowledge. They want to be taught. They want to be on board in this journey. And I think that it's optimal for our parents out there to try and find that in wherever they're engaging, whether it's preschool, school, speech therapist, occupational therapist.
Yes.
I mean, and if it's not the right fit, go and look somewhere else. And that's okay too.
That's okay.
Sometimes it's not.
Yes, exactly. That relationship with everyone that's working with your child and your family is so important. And again, like, it doesn't just have to be the school, it has to be everyone. They have to align with you, your values, but you also have to have that rapport and that relationship.
Definitely.
If you
trust, I think, is the big one.
If you're not gelling, or you don't feel like it's the right fit, definitely, I don't think any therapist or any professional would take that the wrong way. If you were to say, listen, I just don't think it's the right fit.
Yes.
As a speech therapist, that's all I want is to just make sure that the child is getting the help that they need.
Definitely.
They're feeling supported, and that they're feeling like they're connecting with who they are receiving therapy from.
Definitely. How do you manage that alternatively? So if you have a client come to you and you don't think they're the right fit for you, how do you manage that? Or does that not happen?
No, it does. It does definitely happen. And I think that it comes back down to, there's a multitude of different personalities, just when you just strip it back to a very basic level. And not everyone gets along with every personality type as well. So often when we bring clients in through assessment, sometimes we will triage them and go, okay, I think this client with this particular difficulty is best fit for this person. And these are the reasons why. And you're prioritizing the client then, and it's not really about me or the other therapist.
No, it's about the child.
It's about the child.
So giving them the best.
When you take all that away, it doesn't really matter if they're not gelling with that particular therapist. It's okay, let's find something that works for this child and that's even better. Let's make that happen. And at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that we've got the parent's back, the child's back, and we're wanting to help them. The parent knows that. And I say, if it's not working, I will tell you.
Yeah, that's right.
And
your therapist should be telling you. Right? That should be an across the board thing. That should be, if you've got a good relationship with your therapist, that should be.
It's not working, we need to pivot.
Yes.
And I think that's important to feel like that you're getting that from your therapist, is that they can be honest with you, that they have your back, they have your best interests at heart, which I'm sure all the therapists are. But then it's being able to communicate that with each other as well too.
On the back of communication, I would love to discuss something that we do that I find really beneficial, and I'm positive that other people will find beneficial as well, which is, I don't generally bring Ezra to therapy because I work a full-time job. As I'm sure many parent carers out there are also doing, juggling work and medical parenting, caring. It's a full-time job on its own, plus your other job that you have to go to pay the bills. I obviously don't come, and often Ezra is brought by his support worker, which we're very, very grateful and thankful to have. But that means that we obviously don't get to see each other all the time physically. There are two things that we do. One, we communicate via email quite regularly. But we also have a communication book that it's very well loved. And I think we're almost at the end of it now.
See my mini handwriting.
It's very, very well loved. But it's a fantastic tool in me keeping across, and not just me, Craig, my husband as well, my other two kids who are very much actively involved in Ezra's care. It's a really great tool to keep abreast of what's going on in session, but also the things that we can use practical tools that we can use at home or homework if we have any, and things that we can implement.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why do you do that? Because I don't see a lot of other therapists doing this. So why do you do that?
Yeah. It's a great point that you raise. And I think first and foremost, I'd like to address what you said first, which was that parents have so much going on already and they're being pulled in so many different directions. Sometimes parents feel really guilty, with everything they've got on that the mum guilt is real, or the parent guilt, the dad guilt.
Yeah.
And speech therapy has to work with your life.
Yes.
At the end of the day, if you can do speech therapy, but if it's not fitting in with your life, it's not going to work.
Correct.
It's not going to happen.
It's not going to be very beneficial.
No.
It's just stressful. We have to go.
Yes.
Get in a car. I have to be late for work to get here kind of thing.
Yes.
It's never going to be happy.
And then you're resenting it. You're unhappy. That the child then feels that ultimately, or then they start getting stressed or anxious, and it just becomes a bit of a unhappy place. And that's not, at the end of the day, we want people to be happy, right? We want people to be fulfilled in their life and be happy and progressing. And
absolutely,
you have to make compromise when you do that, and you have to work with families on, okay, this is ideally the situation in theory, what is going to be the best gold standard of practice, but then this is what's going to work and be most effective for you and your family. And some parents, families are very different, and some parents might not, they might have to do speech therapy in the car for 5 minutes, and that's all that they can commit to at the moment. And that's fantastic. Let's start there in small achievable steps. So if we can create a way where everything's in one central place, we can all communicate in there, we can stick resources in there. It means that preschool can see it.
Yes.
Everyone's across the same page.
Definitely.
If we can create more communication, why wouldn't we?
Yes.
If we can make it easy to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes that doesn't work for every family.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Sometimes it works better for families to be in and watching it, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It just has to work. You have to make amendments to what works with the family.
Definitely. And do you think that that's something that if people haven't done because they feel that there's just a standard way of doing things, that that's something that they should discuss with their speech therapist?
Yeah, 100%. I think if that's something that you think is going to be really beneficial, 100% bring it up with your therapist. I think it's a really good way. And it also, for me, I've come from an old school way of loving to handwrite everything. So I secretly love it as well. It's easier for me to write things down that way in the board,
typing things,
than type it out as well.
Yeah.
And then I can put pictures in, or I can put resources and say, see, look at this one. This is what we did.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will record videos instead, and I'll just quickly record myself explaining it and showing it.
Yes.
And that works better for some families, and that's just as quick.
Yeah.
I know with Ezra's support worker, we also do little demonstrations, and I'll show, because they also work together with him. So the more people that can be on board and working towards it, the better.
Absolutely. I think the other thing on support, just while we're still on that topic, for people out there who maybe don't know how to, or haven't gone down the rabbit hole of NDIS, from a speech therapy, obviously for me and for Ezra specifically, speech therapy is at the top of priority for me. And if all I could ever get funded was for speech therapy, I would graciously take it and I would pursue. Ezra's needs are complex. He has a lot going on, and I'm sure there's many kids that are way above him, and there's probably even more below his level of need.
Yes.
How would you suggest parents advocate, specifically focusing on speech, when they go to approach NDIS for either a first plan, or maybe they need additional funding, or maybe it's a plan renewal? What's your top tips?
Yes, this is a good one. This is something that I've had lots of experience with over my years, and I've learnt lots about NDIS. It is a tricky one though as well too.
Yeah.
Again, every child is different, and every funding or eligibility looks different too. First and foremost, you need to educate yourself on what is the actual criteria.
Yes.
So I have a lot of information sheets that I've developed even for myself, but I always encourage parents to go on the NDIS website. There's a link there that says, am I eligible, or how to apply?
Yes.
And that's ever changing.
Yes.
So depending on what legislation has last come out, it is updating and changing all the time.
Absolutely.
So I would be across what you actually need to demonstrate to fit the criteria.
Yes.
So typically children under 6 can access a little bit more than older children because they put a lot of the funding into early intervention.
Yes.
I would say collect all the evidence that you can.
Yes.
So any professional that you're linked up with, get as much evidence as you can from them. So whether that's reports, what you've been working on, any diagnosis that you have, you need to be collecting as much information as you can.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the way that funding is linked up at the moment, it does focus on impairment. So you do need to show a level of impairment or disability or a level of difficulty.
Yes.
And sometimes that can be hard for parents because you want to talk about your child in a really strengths-based way or, you know, what they're good at.
To talk positively about our children. We don't want to talk about the negative stuff.
Yes. So it is important that you know that you do have to, when advocating for your child, you do need to speak to what are they struggling with, but what functional impact is that having on their everyday life?
Yes.
So NDIS often want to hear, how does that impact them and their functioning in their life, and what's it stopping them from doing?
Yes.
And why do they need funding in order to help them with that?
Yes.
And then second to that, is funding going to help them not need lots of support later on in life? Is it going to help them progress quicker?
Yes, it's going to either solve the problem or significantly reduce it.
Yes, yes. So the parents know their child the best. So it's about going in and being like, okay, what diagnosis or what difficulty is stopping my child from achieving? And what does that look like? And then you need to advocate for that. We need support. We need help for this.
Yes.
And this is the reason why.
Yeah.
Speak to your therapists as well.
Yeah.
So often your therapists are quite well rehearsed in, you know, submitting reports and letters to NDIS.
Yeah.
So they are a good point of advice as well. I know I speak to a lot of parents about, this is what we need to, like, this is what I'm seeing. And I really think that we could go into advocate for support on this.
Yep.
Are you with me? Do you want to go? And sometimes it is a lot of work.
Totally.
And it's hard.
Absolutely.
But, you know, speak to your therapist because they can, you know, also advocate for your child.
Definitely.
And help you on that journey.
Yes. And you touched on having your other therapists on board, like maybe your OT or your physio or whoever it is, if you've got additional therapists.
Yes.
Do you find that it's generally more successful when applying for funding if the response or the report is more collaborative, i.e. it's supportive of one another's requests? Obviously not saying I agree that, you know, physiotherapy should have 40 hours.
Yes.
That's obviously up to them, but advocating that other supports would help, i.e. core strengthening for Ezra is going to help his diaphragm and therefore help with speech or what have you, so that they're more collaborative in their reports going through to NDIS, rather than it being a whole bunch of siloed reports that don't have a lot of connection.
Yeah, that is a good point. 2 reports is better than 1 report. Yes. Regardless of what they're doing. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So if you can show that there's a multitude of different things going on, that will always help you in gaining the funding that you need, as opposed to maybe there being a very singular or one thing going on.
Yes.
However, yes, it is really helpful. So often in my reports, for example, if I can see that, say, regulation is really stopping the child from learning or even participating in their speech therapy sessions, and then that should be a real focus, I will pop that in my report that, you know, I recommend that this child needs to see this professional because these are the impacts that it's having on this child. It's stopping them from learning. It's stopping them from progressing with their speech.
Yes.
It's creating maybe huge tantrums or outbursts that are affecting, you know, well-being at home potentially.
Yes.
Maybe he's struggling with regulation at preschool and that's stopping him from developing relationships.
Yes.
That's what you want to be popping in that report. And that's things that I could see as a speech therapist in my session. So I will then advocate for that in
your report. That's really useful, I feel.
Yeah.
Like, and really, really helpful. And obviously your reports have been incredible in our ability to secure funding for NDIS. So I can obviously only speak to that. That's the only standard that I go in. So I do have quite high expectations. But I mean, for us, we're self-managed, so I control it.
Yeah.
I have to collect those reports from everybody. I have to get them. I have to put them through. It's all up to me to do it.
Yes.
Obviously, there are people out there that are plan managed, so it's obviously different in how things are collated and things are sent through and communication is had.
Yeah.
I don't know because I haven't been plan managed before, but I do know plenty of people who are. And I know that there's a lot of distinction between the parent, the plan manager, and the NDIS. So sometimes things get lost in translation. Do you think from a speech perspective that it's beneficial for parents to do a carer's impact statement to back up what you've said in your report and what other people have said in their report?
Yeah, I think the more information that you have and the more that you are providing, the better.
Yes.
So I think if in doubt is giving as much information as you can.
Yeah.
And don't hold anything back.
Yeah.
I think it's just putting it all out on the table is only going to help you.
Yes.
So the more information or the more things that you can provide to them, the better.
Yes.
And I think if you just have that mentality of I'm going to give them all the information, I'm going to show them the whole picture.
Yes.
The better chance that you will have on showing that NDIS advisor or whoever you're working with, this is my child as a whole.
Yes.
These are all the different areas that this is impacting and this is why I need the support or the help.
Yeah.
And it might be that you don't need it forever, but
no, that's right.
You might be saying, okay, well, in order for my child not to need it long term,
these are the things we need to do.
These are the things we need to do. So always doing as much as you can. I know it is a hard slog, but it is worth it.
Yes.
In the long run, if you can get that funding across the line, because it is expensive. It is time consuming.
Yes.
And it is really hard. So if you have the ability to access those and you fit the criteria and it's really going to help your family, I would say it's definitely worth it. Yeah.
How does long-term tube usage, I suppose probably more, again, coming back to an NG tube, because if it's a gastrostomy, it's not affecting the mouth as much, or not being able to eat orally, how does that affect speech?
Yes, good question. So I think just to take it, zoom out a little bit and come from a bird's eye perspective, when we think about development, we think about milestones.
Yes.
When a child is, from a baby up until a toddler, there's lots of different milestones that they have to achieve.
Yes.
There can be a variety of different categories that they have milestones in. So they can have, their gross motor milestones, which is like walking and sitting and all of those.
Yes.
They can then have their feeding milestones, which is things like whether they're sucking and swallowing and all of those things.
Yeah.
And then they can have their communication milestones, which is, talking and sounds and babbling.
Yep.
There are studies that suggest that children who are born prematurely or have feeding difficulties at birth or early on are more likely to have communication or speech and language difficulties, a bit later on in life or, growing up and not meeting those milestones. So there's an obvious link with a lot of them is that if a child is tube fed, they might not have as much experience using their muscles in their mouth.
Yes.
And they might then therefore be delayed with meeting some of those because they're not necessarily using them. Or they become a little bit weaker.
Yeah.
And then they're delayed then in potentially making sounds.
Yes.
Where we need, the muscles in the mouth to be working in order to be making sounds and using sounds.
Yes.
Not every child that has a tube is that to say guaranteed to be delayed.
Of course.
Every child is different and it depends on what intervention they're having as well at the time or how quickly we've identified difficulties and things like that. So children can, have very good success in meeting milestones if they're supported correctly.
Of course, yes.
But, there is a link with children who do have or not, are not using their oral muscles as much or they're not eating and swallowing and drinking to have delays in, acquiring sounds or using sounds as they get older as well too.
I think that that's a really good point, and I think that will be reassuring for lots of parents because I think it's very easy to think, well, the tube's out now, why aren't you talking?
Yep.
Or the tube we've been orally intaking for X period of time, but nothing's changing. But obviously it has to rebuild those muscles, and you need to obviously refocus on strengthening your mouth to be able to facilitate the sounds or the words needed to be able to fluently speak.
I think the important thing to note on that as well is that often children who have tubes, whatever that looks like, wherever it is, are not experiencing life necessarily the same as maybe a child who hasn't had a lot of medical appointments and tubes.
Definitely.
So a child who has not spent a lot of time in the hospital, has not been in, hospital rooms or in, whatever the experience is, has potentially then be exposed to a lot more language, or, been in environments where they've been able to absorb a lot more language. So sometimes it can be, those environmental factors that do impact a little bit, that, the family has just been in constant medical rooms and long hospitalizations, and, it hasn't been, they haven't been exposed or, in those environments where there has been a very language-rich environment necessarily. And that's not meant to make anyone feel like they've done anything wrong, and not meant to feel guilty. Like, the safety of the child is the most important. The health 100%. And safety of the child is most important. But sometimes that is a reality, is that they just haven't been exposed to that as well.
Yes.
Which is important to know.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good summary of what that looks like, and I truly think that's going to reassure a lot of parents out there who are probably stressed and worried, and thinking that things should be progressing maybe at a faster pace, or expecting things to sort of move along, and they maybe aren't. So I think hopefully it will reassure people. For anybody out there who hasn't engaged in a speech therapist, maybe they're nervous or they're worried about maybe a diagnosis that they think their child might have, or they just simply haven't got there on their journey because it's very overwhelming and there's a lot to deal with. What would you say to that parent or carer about connecting with a speech therapist?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's very common.
I imagine it is.
It takes a lot for parents to even get to just coming in for their assessment. And I can completely understand that, and it is very different when it's your own child. Sometimes you can see very clearly when you see other children and what they should be doing, but it's very different when it's your own child. Sometimes I've found parents find it really useful is just to call up and ask some questions. You are then not having the commitment of being there in person. You can escape the phone call if you need to. But I will often, our receptionist here will take lots of phone calls, and I will be happy just to speak to parents.
That's great.
And give them some advice, talk to them about what I think with no pressure to do anything really. Just give them information.
That's amazing.
I think speech therapists in general are love to help people. So
I would agree.
They will give you advice no matter what. So I would just ask if you can speak to a speech therapist over the phone and just ask them a few questions before you book an assessment. Or if look on your local community pages. Often there's speech therapists doing things at preschools. I know we go and talk at preschools, or we go and do screeners at preschools. We go and do chats, or we do things on socials, or we answer questions. So sometimes we have parents reach out on Instagram or whatever it is. Whatever's comfortable for you, I just reach out and ask questions.
I think that's really great, practical, real life advice, because at midnight, when you've been up 3 times, turning off pumps and turning them back on and clearing errors and all of those kinds of things, that's when your mind starts going, oh, I really should connect with this person, or I really should do that. And that's where social media and emails come in really handy. You can connect at a time that works for you and respond when it suits you. And I think that's helpful. Or pick up the phone at a time that works for you. Obviously through business hours, but generally we can find time to make these kind of calls. So I think that's really fantastic advice.
I'm glad.
Thank you. And thank you for being on the podcast. I hope it's been an enjoyable experience too. It's been wonderful to have you. I feel like I have learnt so much, even feeling like I was empowered and knew a lot already. I feel like I've learnt so much more.
Oh, good.
And it's given me a whole other insight into what it is that goes on behind the scenes.
Yes.
The things that you don't see.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have you back on again.
Yes. Absolutely.
And I think it would be really, I think we've got some excellent things that we could share with people.
Yes. Yes. No, thank you for having me. I've loved it.
Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Tube. It's been great to have you here again. And another huge thanks to Bree for being on here today. I'm looking forward to seeing you again on the next one. Until then, be safe, and we'll see you on the next one.